Let's get started. Thank you everyone for joining us. Let's start with intros. I am Alex Sabio, married father of four, live here in Southern California. I have a small luxury short-term rental business that I started about 3 years ago, and me and Christianne have something in common. We started in a market very around the same exact time, actually. Financially free because of that. And I've gotten into hotels, and I just enjoy helping other healthcare workers. I'm actually a respiratory therapist, been doing that for 21 years now. Really enjoy it. And now I only work because I enjoy working it, not because I have to. So
amazing.
Yeah. And hey, everyone, I'm Savannah. I started investing in real estate beginning of 2020. I'm a registered nurse, been a registered nurse for about 9 years now. Started investing in single family homes, switched into multifamily syndications. I just recently transitioned my primary residence into a midterm rental. So I've been playing with a lot of different real estate strategies over the last few years. Absolutely in love with syndications because I love providing passive investing opportunities to other healthcare professionals. That's a huge passion of mine and something really big behind net worth nurse and everything that I've been building there. So with that, I will kick it over to Christianne and have you kick it off and intro yourself and tell everyone what you're all about.
Yeah, thank you so much, Savannah and Alex. So yes, my name is Christianne Crump, and I actually have a medical background too. I'm an RN. I have worked in a variety of different divisions within nursing. I had a few years as a pediatric home health nurse, and then I transitioned to second stage recovery and outpatient surgery, and then actually spent a fair bit of time towards the end of the last, I would say, 7 years of nursing that I was doing was actually in clinical trials. I spent a few years working on analgesics clinical trials, and then when my husband started graduate school, I ended up working at the James Graham Brown Cancer Center in Louisville, Kentucky, at working in the clinical trials department there, so oncology clinical trials, and mostly specialized in lung cancer and breast cancer clinical trials. So really, really cool. I loved it. Obviously, it was really fun to be able to serve, the people in whatever situation that they were in, wherever they were at. And really, once I got into the clinical trials section, I just became really passionate about that. But then as my husband finished school and we moved away, total separate story. It just took us forever to start a family. We were finally able through in vitro to start a family. And at that point, I decided that after having worked so hard to get our family, I was ready to kind of hang up the stethoscope and focus on the 3 beautiful boys that we ended up having. So that's been since about 2006, since I last had to work in nursing. And since then, I have been raising the family. And then my husband is a dentist. And so I pivoted to helping to support him in his practice with different marketing aspects and kind of building the brand. And then once we decided a couple of years ago in 2021 that, as a successful professional, we were looking for alternative investment strategies as opposed to just straight up the stock market. And also in counseling with some our accountant and kind of just financial planners and strategists, they suggested that we look into potentially getting into short-term rentals. At the time, we had a family cabin that we bought in 2014, about 2 hours north of us, that we had friends who'd asked us if they could rent it or use it, but we were pretty selfish about it. So other than just a handful of people that we invited to come use it occasionally, we really drug our feet as far as thinking about putting it on the market as a rental. But,
people weren't really doing that, right? They weren't really doing the hack of creating financial freedom through short-term rentals, right?
Right. I mean, now I kick myself because I'm like, that was 2014. I mean, if we had jumped on the bandwagon clear back then, it probably would have accelerated the entire short-term rental journey for us because it would have opened our eyes so much sooner. I mean, honestly, that mortgage would have been probably completely paid off in just a couple of years. And yeah, who knows where we would have been if we had pivoted earlier. But so we decided that it was a completely dated, it was fine. Everything was functional, but we'd have mauve carpet and super dated light fixtures and just everything needed a refresh. So we, gave it that refresh that we knew it needed to be able to perform well. The location was great, on a lake with a dock, mountain view, all of that stuff. So we pivoted and went through that process, and then kind of only a couple of months, we were still mid-remodel and had an opportunity that came along for purchasing a property in Gulf Shores, Alabama. So it was crazy, but we decided to do that simultaneous to remodeling the house here in Idaho, which is where I am. We're in a suburb of Boise. So I was purchasing a property and bringing a property that was over 2,000 miles away from me online at the same time as managing a remodel and preparing to completely furnish and bring this other rental up to speed. So like the last half of 2021 and solidly the first half of 2022 was like crazy. I mean, and we were stone cold newbies and really didn't know. I really had no idea really what was going to be involved, but it was like the perfect learning experience because I was instantly immersed in every aspect of the business. So, and it's just been great.
Yeah, I want to stop here and mention something because me and Christianne are co-authors in this book called Hospitable Hosts Volume 2. Yep. I actually read her chapter. Very interesting story because we kind of got into it a lot for the same reasons because initially it was kind of like a tax write-off strategy, right? Mm-hmm. And that's my CPA, Amanda Hahn, who has been on here with us. She's talked about that short-term rental loophole and, you know, being a high net worth individual working in healthcare, you're like, really? Are you sure? Like,
I know.
And so it worked out beautifully. But I want to go back to something because I think it might highlight a lot of maybe why you started STR Hub, because your first guest wasn't the most ideal guest, right? It just didn't work out like how they plan in the books or whatever, right?
Yeah, so the story that he's referring to, I wrote about in the chapter in Hospitable Hosts. So, you know, we were remodeling that cabin, and because the accountant told us that we needed to, our goal was that we were going to start taking advantage of those tax benefits immediately, like as quickly as we could, even beginning in that 2021. And we didn't even really start. I mean, I think I kicked off the remodel in like October of 2021. And the goal was that we would start being able to expense some of those remodel costs and whatnot right then on the 2021 taxes. But the actual complete remodel was going to take months more than just, you know, a handful of months because it was extensive. And so, but the accountant's telling us that in order to be able to utilize some of the short-term rental, you know, benefits tax-wise, you needed to have a couple of reservations. You know, it actually had to be in service. That was the technical term. So he's like, you need to put it in service. You need to get 2 to 3 reservations and guests that stay before the end of the year. And at that point, the house was completely torn up. I had no flooring in either floor. There's 3 bathrooms. 2 of them were completely gone. Like all my appliances were shifted because we were painting all of the cabinetry. It was crazy. Mm-hmm. So I was like, how on earth am I going to accomplish this? Because my house is a disaster. And so the fix that I came up with was we actually had hired a guy to come up from the valley here and paint our cabinets up at the cabin. And so I was like, hey, do you and your wife want to come up and just stay a couple of days at our place while you work? I mean, it is a vacation destination locally, so they could enjoy the lake and some of the area attractions. And he's like, oh yeah, that sounds great. And of course I was charging like nothing, like $150 a night. But, you know, he's like, hey, I've worked construction my entire life. I don't even care. Like, this is totally par for the course for us. So they came up and stayed for like 2 or 3 days. And like, bam, that was my very first booking, which is perfect because I didn't have to worry about, it wasn't on Airbnb. It was literally, I wrote up my contract. I had created an LLC and that's all I did. So really, and then it worked so well with them. Like I had my contractor do it a couple of times and other people who were coming for working on the house. They, you know, as opposed to them needing to stay at a local hotel while they were up away from home working, they just stayed at my property. It was perfect.
I bring that up because I've had a host say, a lot of times us hosts want everything to be perfect. And I had a host, she said, you know what, I just don't have internet and it's not going to be in there till next year. And she's telling me this in September. And she said, you know what, I'm just not going to rent it out. Well, and I'm like, wait, no. You're missing out on a ton of bookings. Just set expectations up front and trust me on this, you're going to be okay. And so when I read your story, I thought about that. Also, I've had hosts say, I don't have the professional pictures. Like it's taking forever to get the photographer I want. And I'm like, just screw it. Just go with what you have and start making money now and then we'll figure it out. So
yeah, totally. Yeah, I agree with that.
So then you go into your second one, like right away, just jump right in, right? And the crazy thing is, see, I purchased my home in Gulf Shores in same exact time you did. And my thought process was I need to get it ready for the Hangout Fest.
Oh,
And my renovations went like completely way over than what I expected. So it's so hard for a renovation, right? Just to go through renovation on top of trying to learn all the ins and outs of running the STR business, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I would necessarily recommend it, but you know what? You just have to embrace the journey, right? You know, you're on a journey, you know, you're learning something new, but even though it's a ton of work, it's also really fun. It's like you're living your best Joanna Gaines life or whatever. Like you're really like getting to do all these super fun things that you've only been watching on reality, you know, fixer-upper reality shows or HGTV. And so like, I was loving it. And my sister flew out to Alabama when I was putting that together. And I mean, my kids like nicknamed me 2 carts because we'd go to like Home Goods or Target or whatever, and we needed at least 2 carts. We'd fill them up. Like, I had 3 times I was shopping so much that my credit card locked up because of fraud, and I had to like call Capital One and be like, I swear my card hasn't been stolen. I'm just like having this massive shopping frenzy for the next 2 weeks. And so, I mean, it was crazy. It was so crazy, but you know, and the rental car is like completely packed with 9,000 pillows and quilts and everything. And you can't even see out the rearview mirror. And like, that's the stuff that you really don't see. But once you've been in it, you're like, oh yeah, that's like the way it is every time. 10,000 Amazon boxes and whatever, but it's fun. It's a party.
Christianne, can you dive into STR Hub and what your transition into that and show us it and really what your thought process was behind building it?
Absolutely, for sure. So, you know, coming into the space, there's 10,000 decisions you have to make. And, you know, once I got the listings basically live, and once I made the switch from like 1 to 2, once you start to have multiple properties, things get a little more complicated. I wanted to be on Airbnb and VRBO. Now I'm on booking.com as well. Like, in order to really juggle all of that, multiple platforms and the multiple properties simultaneously, then you're starting to think, well, maybe I need a PMS. And people start saying, oh yeah, dynamic pricing is a huge thing, direct booking, you want to get a direct booking site. And, you know, it just starts compounding all these things. You're like, oh, I need to get this. And initially the things that I chose, I was just like talking to my own little like bubble of short-term rental friends, and everybody's kind of using the same thing. So I'm like, well, if it's good enough for her, it's probably good enough for me. And so I just like threw a tech stack together. But then kind of once the dust settled and I had like a moment to breathe, I came up for air and I started looking around and checking around the internet and realized, oh my gosh, there's like all these other amazing companies. Maybe what's best for her business actually isn't the best fit for my business and, you know, the goals that I have. And I was like, oh, but I think I want my rental agreement automated. And I think I want all these other things. And so I really began realizing I need to relook at everything. And so then I'm like doing demo calls and I've got a spreadsheet going. I've got stacks of papers collecting. And I'm like trying this time to be really thorough and like type A professional, like this is my business. I care about it a lot. I want to make good decisions. Anyways, as all this paperwork and stuff is piling up, I realize, and I'm in Facebook groups, right? We're in all these different groups and I'm seeing people constantly. They're like, oh, what property management software to use? Or do you like TouchStay? Or do you like this or this? And like everybody's having the same problem. And so I realize it's crazy because someone's responding to someone that question. And then like tomorrow, the very next day in the same group, almost the identical question comes right back up. And it's like such a stinking waste that someone yesterday took the time to leave that remark and be super helpful. And now it's gone. And so someone else is having to write the exact same question, basically looking for an answer. Plus I had all this information. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to put all this together. It evolved into being a website. And so that's really what strhub.com is it's this website where I'm just basically aggregating all of this information. And, you know, I'm happy. I will just screen share at this point and show you guys. So basically, I mean, the cool thing about it is we've got a whole bunch of the information on the technology solutions, you know, the property management software, dynamic pricing tool, digital guest guide, market intelligence. That's like your AirDNA, your transparent key data, STR insights, accounting software, you know, cleaning and property care. That's like the Breezeway, Easy Care. There's like a whole bunch of them actually that maybe people don't even know about. And then channel managers, you know, lots of PMSs do channel management, but there's also dedicated channel managers, payment processors, guest screening software, you know, your SuperHog, your AutoHost, you know, all of those. Noise aware, noise and occupancy monitoring, that's the noise aware, the minute, et cetera, et cetera. OTAs, I've kind of, you know, we all know Airbnb and booking.com and stuff, but there's like hundreds. There actually is hundreds of OTAs. I only have a handful. I'm continuing this. I don't know, this website will probably never be done, but then also smart locks, access control, you know, Operto, Enzo Connect, Jervis Systems, all these companies, concierge solutions. That's like the Hostco, Mount. I mean, there's a bunch. Direct booking websites, and then this whole services section, which this is like the whole other layer, which this, I will say, still very much a work in progress because I'm trying to track down the accountants, the bookkeepers, lenders, realtors, cost segregation providers, you know, educators, consultants, people who have courses, guest damage insurance options, property insurance options, attorneys, you know, people who can help you set up your properties, photographers, interior designers, staffing solutions, VAs, and then like the property managers and co-hosts. I thought that made sense to bring in too because, you know, someone at, you know, they may think that they're going to end up managing their own property, but then, maybe life changes and it's time to make a switch and you're like, who could I get to co-host or whatever? Well, great, we can help you out. But I'll just switch in here to the dynamic pricing software and give you a sense of how this works. Sorry, Okay, so here you are. I go to this one because it's really popular and people are always asking about property management software. So, I've kind of got here at the top some very popular ones that people have heard of, or maybe not. Tokeet's not one that is necessarily as much of a household name in, the US or whatever, but Hostaway, Hostify, IGMS, Cirrus, Fantastic Stay, Escapia, LMPM, Beds24. Maybe you've heard of these companies, maybe you haven't. But it's mind-boggling. Like, can you see over on the side? This is how far I have still to scroll. Like, you can just get going here. A lot of people, you don't even know what you don't know. There's so many companies. And on the one hand, this could be super overwhelming. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't even, don't make me. But
so how do you filter it? Is filtering kind of the best way that people make their ways through these lists?
Yeah. So, whoops, my header wanted to jump in there. So you can filter. So here's features that you can potentially have, and I can see that this is being goofy. Filters for different features that could potentially be in your property management softwares. But another thing that you can do is we've built this comparison tool. So say you're like, okay, I really Hospitable, Owner Res, and then Tokeet. I've never even heard of Tokeet, so I'm really curious about those. So then you can also run a comparison on those companies and see side by side who they're good for. And some companies, and this doesn't line up perfectly because there was actually a bit to say about, in this case, Hospitable, about whether it really is potentially a good fit for property managers and co-hosts. It depends. Whereas some, it's very straightforward. Yes, it's great for the self-managing owner. Yes, it's great for property managers and co-hosts. So pricing, if it's publicly available, we've got that out there. And then we break down the features. And this is in-depth. This is what I would want to know if I was looking for a property management software. What are the OTAs that I can potentially connect with? Or, what does channel management look like? What's the setup look like? Is there an onboarding fee? Owner Res, you can do DIY, or you can hire them to kind of help you with the setup, and that's $500. So what payment processors? As you can see, it's a ton of info, but this is the stuff you'd want to need. And then we were also, able to break out some pros and cons of these different platforms. So super duper helpful. Lots of information.
Yeah, I love that because I'm in the process of picking a different property management software right now. And when you talk about everyone's in a bubble in your own group, everyone was in the Owner Res bubble. And I tried it and could not tolerate it. And I start thinking, is there something wrong with me? I just don't understand it. But it just wasn't my fit. And then then I started trying all of these different tools, and I'm like, man, the grass isn't greener on the other side. They all kind of have their pluses and minuses, right? But STR Hub breaks that down, which I really like.
And you know what? This is, the website just came out of beta in March. So this is going to continue to evolve, and this tool is only going to get better. I'll just show you something else. I love the dynamic pricing tool section. These companies have been so awesome. For example, I've had amazing positivity from these vendors who have these companies. I have the capacity for these different vendors to send me photos and, GIFs and different things so that people can actually see what it actually looks like, poking around in Price Labs. Mm-hmm. So
that's so helpful because a lot of them do have some of the same features. So it comes almost down to a usality from the user end of how it functions. So that's so awesome. Speaking of it, since we're on this subject, someone popped in the chat. If I do consulting on Price Labs and dynamic pricing, is it possible to get listed on your site? I'm also a local San Antonio co-host. So maybe when you answer that question, answer how do you find your vendors for this site? What's kind of your requirements?
Yeah, no, for obviously for the technology companies, I have a huge, what you can't see is what's publicly published on the website is a small fraction of what we actually have data on. The process for me, you'll find particularly in the PMS category, there's hundreds of PMS companies. It's labor intensive for us to do the research on them. And then the flow that I have is I actually, once we've researched them independently, I reach out to them via email or whatever. And I say, hey, by the way, we've been researching your company, and here's a draft of this information that we're planning to publish. Would you just look it over and make sure that it's complete and accurate? Obviously, I don't want to get sued by any companies that I've published for like wrong information. So I run through that with them, and they make sure that everything is correct. So for the technology companies, I've been able to just do that research. I mean, honestly, I understand that services section is going to take time to flesh out. It's going to take time for people who are accountants or bookkeepers to hear about STR Hub and to send me info. But we do, for all these different categories, we have this who did we miss section. So if you're a property manager or a co-host, here's basically what it says when you click on that. We'd love to add you to these directories. So this form basically right here, anyone can fill out. This is an Asana form. I guess it says it right there. And when you fill that out, it gets sent directly to a member of our team, where you basically give us your name, your email address, your business name. If you have a website, as you can see, there's no star there. So don't feel like that has to be a barrier. You're like, but I don't have a website. That's okay. Just send us your information. If you have a logo or an image, because you could see a second ago, we put that on. A little bit of like summary text, and then, kind of break down the features you have. That's it. That's all we need. And we can get you started. We can get you listed, as a co-host or, whatever other service for the education and consultant section. We've got people who help host with training of various sorts. So we're happy to add people to this. That just continues to increase the value that the website gives for people. So, suppliers here, furnishings and housewares, Showplace, hosting, GPO, Minoan, InHaven, Etsy, obviously, but then a bunch of others. And I actually have a ton more in this that I haven't even had a chance to publish. It's a work in progress, but we're literally like wrapping our arms around the entire industry. It's going to take time. But then in this guide section, this is kind of like a freebie for anybody who wants to, and Alex, maybe it's helpful for you. I've actually created, this is a 10-page guide that's just a free download that you can come, and it walks you through the process that I would use. And that's basically like deciding what features you want and all those different types of things to help you. And then also I've written really good, here, I'll stop sharing here. So bad that I can't see everybody's face. I've done an astronomical number of demos, right? I've talked to so many companies. And so it's really helpful when you're doing a demo because obviously the people have like their set spiel that every time they do a demo call, this is kind of what they say. And so in order to make sure you get the most out of your call and that you're actually getting your questions answered and not just what they're wanting to tell you, what I've done is I've got all these, I've curated a big long list of questions, and you can just basically put a big red circle around the ones that you're like, oh yeah, that is a great question. I should ask that. And then I've got a space where as you're going through that demo call, you can capture some of those answers. And then I've got like a post-demo evaluation form. So while it's fresh in your mind, okay, what stood out to me about this one? And what do I feel like might be, some features that it doesn't have that I wish I could have? That really means that when you finish, the 2 or 3 demos after you've kind of filtered down, you can make a solid decision that's, really going to be solid and confident. And you can move forward with confidence. You don't have to just take a comment that some random person made, oh, everybody says OwnerRez is amazing. Okay, everybody says it's amazing. I guess I'll sign up for it. But you can actually make the decision in a very educated way. So I don't know, all of that. And then really the podcast was the next step to this. So I'll circle around before I think we started the recording. Alex brought up that, I got invited to start a podcast in connection with STR Hub. And my goal for that, it's been so interesting because obviously I'm like everybody else. I listen to a ton of podcasts for our space, and it's people who are coaches or have a course or, whatever. And their shows are like tips and tricks. And this is how you whatever with your business, which is great. And we need all of that. But really where I am in my position in the industry and, all of this work that I've done with STR Hub is I felt like I wanted a podcast where I could bring companies on the show. And instead of having, today I recorded with Mark Simpson, who most everybody probably knows of him, direct booking guru with Boostly. When Mark goes on most podcasts, Mark really isn't talking about Boostly. He's talking about why direct bookings are important or, other kind of peripheral things generically about direct bookings. And it's like, Mark, I want you to come on my show and I want you to talk about Boostly, because the point of my podcast is that I I'm making those calls. I'm doing the demos. I am getting educated on all these companies, and I am taking everybody with me. Like, you get to ride shotgun with me. I'm gonna have those conversations, and you get to be the fly on the wall. So as I'm getting educated about these companies, all the listeners get that education as well. And so when I had him on the show today, I'm like, tell us what it actually looks like being a Boostly customer. Like, how do we actually get started? Because sometimes you imagine what it's going to be, and it's going to be so hard to like create this whole website, and I just don't even want to go there. It becomes like you're overwhelmed at just the thought of it. So I'm like, can you break that down for us? Because I need to know what it actually looks like, and I think people are curious too. And then I've also, people who have like a platform like a PMS, or in his case Boostly and stuff, we're creating this bonus content that's gonna be like a video portion at the end. All our podcast listeners can, find it on YouTube. We'll have a YouTube channel as well that connects with that. I'll probably bring this bonus content right into the STR Hub website. So, like when you were looking at OwnerRes or whatever, like I've already got some different PMS companies scheduled to be guests on the show. Like, we'll have that bonus content where they'll take us into OwnerRes or Journey or some of these other Hospitable or whatever. So you can tune into the podcast, learn all about what it actually is like, and kind of the things that you may not have heard about these different companies, and then see that little video snippet. To me, that would have been so helpful when I was getting started and trying to determine what solutions are best for me. So I guess I'm like creating what I wish I would have had and what I wish I would have found. So anyways, that's the...
Yeah, I was going to say, because I've had a lot of those calls too, and the one thing I regret is, shoot, I should have just recorded the whole thing. Right? And have it and send it to someone, because people will always ask me, like literally today, people was asking me like something on Price Labs. And so all I do is I send them the video that me and Savannah did with Becca. But the thing is, that was like 2022. But at least it's something, because I think people are a lot more visual. I mean, how does it work nowadays? When we want to learn something, we just go on YouTube and we try to see something. Yeah. And sometimes we don't want the Amazon thing where we're looking online and then you get the product you already paid for and you're like, oh crap, it's not really what I was expecting. Yeah. And so that's kind of what you're trying to do, which I really like.
Yeah. So looking at the short-term rental hub, it looks like you have a community, so people can go on there and register and create an account. And it looks like it's free. So what's your business model behind STR Hub? How are you generating revenue with the business?
Yeah, that's actually a fantastic question. And truthfully, at this point, I'm really not. I do have some of the companies, you'd be surprised how many don't, but some of the companies do have like a partnership or affiliate program. And so if they do, they've been very generous to be like, absolutely, we'd love to, give you a link and let you do that. That is not a way anyone is going to get rich. Let me just tell you right now, because it's not a ton of money, and whether someone clicks through to one of those people, typically it's always tied into whether they sign up or whatnot. So honestly, it is not super lucrative. So when you click on a link out of STR Hub, just know, you don't have to feel bad that I'm making tons of money, because I'm actually not. But a couple of different ways. So as the site continues to grow, as the word gets out, it's going to eventually reach a point where the value that the site brings to the different vendors will continue to grow. And at that point, the way that it will no longer be affiliate links. They'll have like a flat fee or something like that for being, on the website. At this point, I'm realistic enough. I know that the traffic, while it's still growing, I don't want to be charging someone anything for being on the site unless I know that I'm bringing them value. Same way for all the different, accountants, bookkeepers, whatever. I'm not charging anyone anything to be listed. Eventually, there will come a point in the future where there's enough people going there, and we're actually enough eyeballs are seeing all that information that it will potentially make sense for, people to maybe pay $15 or $20 a month. These small people, just the private services people, if you want to be listed, it's a small amount for the opportunity to be listed in our directory, but we're not there yet. And I would rather over deliver on that than try to start taking people's money right up front, just in an effort to make a ton of money off the website. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, and I think Alex and I have been in this industry long enough and have brought enough speakers into this meetup to know that people who are just naturally adding value over and over, that eventually it does become a business. And so that's why I'm just thinking the mindset of how did you turn in your passion of trying to come and figure out the answer and compile all this information in one place. Now you're diverting a big chunk of your time and focus towards that, as opposed to building your short-term rental business, right? So why are you making that huge focus to grow on that? Like, what is your plan to monetize anyways, that was kind of my thought process behind it. But curious now, like how much time do you dedicate towards this as opposed to building your short-term rental portfolio? What does that kind of look like for you now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've got those 2 properties that are up and running. And as you know, if you do it right, once they're up and running, it's not a super headache. Obviously, we're in prime season. I've got tons of people coming and going out of Gulf Shores and at my cabin as we're now in the summer season. So, but I've built a pretty good system, so it doesn't weigh me down a ton. I am able to devote more time towards the website and now the podcast. We are, and I don't know, maybe if we opened this up for everyone, everybody would be chiming in. Like, this is a really, really weird year as far as like what investing in a property looks like. There's so many dynamics in play in the market. And so we're trying to decide if we want to invest again this year, if we do, where we want to invest and what that's going to look like. If anybody else has a crystal ball, feel free to raise your hand in Zoom here and chime in. But we haven't really decided what that move looks like for us. And actually, I mean, kind of a side note, my husband was just recently given an opportunity to purchase another dental practice locally. So that actually, it may be an alternative real estate investment. So in addition to our short-term rentals, we own 2 commercial property spaces here locally. Medical commercial. So we don't have to worry about nobody wants to work in their office anymore. We're not dealing with that commercial real estate bubble. Our buildings are fully occupied with medical tenants. But yeah, we may be investing in that commercial and like business side this year and kind of taking a breather while we watch what happens in the short-term rental space. So
I kind of appreciate where you and Savannah have that drive to jump into something like this. Where did you have any tech background or anything like that before jumping on this, or was it just ambitious? You saw a need and you're like, I'm going to fill a need.
Do you know what? A tech background, no, not really. Other than when my husband, when we started his practice here, we needed a website. The practice that we purchased from the other doctor, literally, I think his website was from like the yellow pages, like the free ones that they gave you when they first started, like in the early 90s.
So email, yeah.
Yeah, basically, it was crazy. It was like this total junk website, and so we're like, okay, we really have to do like a legit website. And so we built out a really strong website, and that was like my pet project. And I spent a ton of time researching, and anyways, it was great. And we actually ended up on the very first page of Google. Like if you Googled Boise dentist, we were number 1, which was awesome, and it completely transformed our business. So that really laid the foundation, I guess, so that when I had this idea, I was like, okay. But I did not code it. I am not a coder. I had worked with local companies who are web developers in the past, and we actually have 2 dental practices here. And so this was like, I just called the people that I knew and I said, hey, I've got this other idea. I know you guys can do this and help me build it. So this website is actually a ton of custom coding, and I just hired people to do it. And then I knew enough from the work that I'd done that, I have a general sense of what the SEO is going to look like. And I just know it's kind of a long game type of thing when you're building a website. Anything like this, being on podcasts and all those other things, that accelerates it. But there's other things kind of behind the scenes that it takes time for you to build authority in Google's eyes. So it will all come. It'll come.
Yeah. So how are you getting the word out there about STR Hub? Like, what's your biggest form of marketing? Who are you catering to specifically?
Yeah, so obviously things like this are great. I've been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to be a podcast guest on a couple of podcasts now, and hopefully more are, going to come along down the way, which is great because, there's an audience kind of already right there. And it's a great way to just organically spread the word. And obviously I would love it. Anybody who's here who, got a chance to take a peek at it and they're like, that's amazing. Please spread the word. Tell anybody that you know. Share it with all of your short-term rental friends. 6 letters, strhub.com. Super easy. But then we did, create a Facebook page, and I'll be honest, I'm working on getting better on social media. So talking on social media and things like that. But I would say one of the strongest things that's going to work in my favor, at least the plan, right? So here's my little sneak peek on my plan. One of the benefits of creating the podcast for me, and kind of the way my podcast is, where I'm talking to all of these industry companies and vendors, is, they already have a whole network of users and email lists of thousands and thousands of people. So when I have the CEO of, Enzo Connect on my podcast, and I've created, a promotional thing for us to promote it and for him to promote it, when he promotes it, I'm getting a ton more of value out of them posting about being on my show than me posting about having them on my show. So, but that's really going to stretch the reach quite a bit. And then it's crazy. I went to London in April to the to the short-term, short stay summit. That's what they called it there. And it was great. I met the CEO of AirDNA. Totally got to interview her. I interviewed the CEO of Breezeway. I interviewed the guys from Wheelhouse. All these different companies that I met. So, connecting with all of them, it's just accelerating. It's been great. It's really been phenomenal.
Hey, I want to put you on the spot here. Okay,
Please.
So a lot of us are STR operators. Give us a software that you're like, hey, you know what? People haven't heard about this software yet. And I interviewed them or researched, and I'm like, I think people would benefit from using this one software, and I think it's a little bit better.
Oh, do you know what? I mean, that's a hard question to ask because we all have our different pain points, right? So, I remember the first time I ran across Rubaroo.
Never heard of it.
I should be like, raise your hand if you've heard of Rubaroo. Like, everyone's like, what's Rubaroo? So, I feel like guest messaging is a huge part of our business. And I ran across Rubaroo last summer, actually. And Rubaroo, it's like a digital guest guide. It does great guest messaging, like SMS guest messaging. They'll give you a phone number that's associated with it. And it's cool. Rubaroo is more commonly used by property management companies. They're always at VRMA. That's probably that's probably more their target avatar customer. They're not necessarily trying to reach to people who have, 1 to 5 properties or 1 to 10 properties. But it's really cool if you have a team. They can let you pass off that messaging certain days of the week. So-and-so does it. If you had a VA, Rubaroo would be really great for that. And then also, if you have like your own direct booking website and maybe a Google business account, Rubaroo at the end of your guest stay can create this survey where if you get a 5-star review, they're going to automatically push that person to leave a Google review for you. And I was like, that's awesome, because then you start to grow that, and it kind of just happens fully automated. There's just some cool features there. And that's literally off the top of my head, but there is so many cool ones. And it's been really interesting as I have been, doing this deep dive. I mean, like Operto, I've mentioned Denso Connect. There's another one called Charge Automation. Like, there's all these super cool companies. I am seeing these tech companies. I mean, even Breezeway, you think of Breezeway as like, the thanks for visiting gals are always talking about Breezeway, and it's like, oh, we use it for managing our inventory and helping with our cleaners, which is great, but Breezeway actually does a ton more that people don't even think about Breezeway for. Now they have a digital guest guide. You can do messaging with your teams and with your guests, and there's like more. They brought in AI. These companies are evolving, and so like that's part of the value of the podcast too. It's like, I could talk to Breezeway, and literally probably 18 months later, it's probably worth having them back on the show, because these companies are changing, and they're changing fast. One of my pain points is I got to make sure I'm like staying up on all these companies, which is great because I've like got all these connections, and so I'm trying to build this automated system where they get an email from like me quarterly or 3 times a year, where it's like, hey, let's make sure the content on STR Hub is fresh. If there's been any changes, let's make sure we get things updated. But I do have companies, like I just got an email this morning from a channel manager, NextPax, and they were like, hey, we've changed our pricing a little bit. Will you update that on your site? And like when that starts to happen, I'm like, okay, we're like getting there. Like when these companies make changes, I'm on the list of people that they reach out to make sure that we've got things updated. So that's like really confidence building, and makes me feel like, okay, I'm like getting there. I'm just going to hang in here, and this is going to all come together.
Yeah, what has been some of your biggest hangups with building that business and site and overall, endeavor?
You know what? That's actually a really easy question to answer, because I still do not love, there's parts about the user experience on the website that I'm like, oh, I want that to be so much better. Like originally when I created the site, the way the menu is structured, I was like, oh, this is going to be so brilliant. We're going to like set it up so it totally takes users through the journey of the whole short-term rental experience. Like you start at the beginning and you're trying to decide what market to invest in, you're doing research, and then you find a property, and then you need your lender, or you need a realtor to help you find a house in that market, and then you're going to need insurance. And I had this menu that was like 5 categories wide, and then it was like everything to set up and stock your property, and then it was like you need to manage and maintain. And even still, like I love it, and for my type A mind, it feels like genius. But I think it was overwhelming because people clicked on the menu and all of a sudden all this stuff popped up, and they're like, I don't even know where to start. Like it's like deer in the headlights. So that's when I simplified it down to just technology and services. And, but even still you click on that and it's like this huge long list. And I worry, these are the things that I worry about. I'm like, is that too much? Is that overwhelming? Like, I don't want to cross anything out. I've taken off 2 things in the services section. I had cleaners and I had maintenance. And I was like, wait a minute. I'm going to go crazy if I try to gather up all the cleaners out there and all the, so maybe one day that'll happen. But yeah, I still, and I am totally open to feedback. So Christianne at strhub.com. Anybody, please email me, give me your straight up user feedback, because I know it's rough around the edges. We're just getting started. If anybody has any thoughts about how it can be evolved to serve you better, I am literally all ears. So that's been one of the hardest things for me. And then I would say number 2 in that is finding all these service providers. I don't know who's in Austin, Texas, that's an accountant that can help. I don't know of these random attorneys that really have been helping real estate investors for years, but everybody wants to find you. So, hopefully I can eventually, enough people will hear about the website and that they'll get connected and want to get found, because that's what we're here for. The maximum value that I can bring to people who come to the website, that is the end goal. I want it to be the one-stop shop.
I think the way you just talked about Woo or even Breezeway is going to be your sweet spot, because the way you just brought it on is gold. And that's exactly what I want to hear, where I'm like, oh, maybe that's a song. I'm like typing it in right now, trying to figure it out. And I think if you pump out more content like that, I think you're going to do really, really well, because we want that information.
It's like no one has time, right? Who has time?
Right. I want a quick, give me a high level 1 minute, 2 minute thing, describe it really quick, and I think you're going to do really well. Let me ask you this one thing. What advice would you give to someone that's looking to create their website or do something similar to what you're doing? Like they see a need and they're wanting to fill that need.
Do you know what? Man, I guess the advice would be, you really got to get your mental game straight, because even still, I have days where I wake up. Well, I mean, think about this. I started the kernel of the idea of STR Hub came to me. It's over a year ago now, and so how do you keep the fire alive for more than a year? I mean, I was working on this, fleshing out what the website should look like, and I mean, imagine me back in last fall, and I'm messaging Hostaway or these major industry technology companies. You've literally never heard of my name. I have no website to show you, but I'm doing this thing and this is what I want it to look like. And would you please tell me everything about your company? Can you imagine the terror that I felt the very first time I sent off that message to those companies? Because I'm like, they're going to just straight to the junk box. Who is actually going to reply to my message?
What was their response?
Well, do you know what? It was a learning process. I eventually learned how to create that conversation and what that email needed to be, where they were like, oh, absolutely. And phone calls were great. But I mean, where I was going to go is it takes time, and you have to have enough belief in your idea to keep the fire going through that whole journey of evolution of taking it from a thought to a concept. And it's still hard for me. I've gone through it all over again with the podcast, because, like I was saying, when Will was like, hey girl, you need a podcast. I'm like, at first, the first thing you're like, oh, I do? Oh, that's so fun. I'm so glad that you think that I need a podcast. And then the next day I'm like, oh crap. I have to do a podcast? How am I going to fit this in? And how am I going to make my podcast be something that anyone's going to want to listen to? Which I'm so glad you told me that would be helpful to you, that little snippet on the companies, because that's what the podcast is going to be. So thank you for being my proof of concept there, Alex.
Yep.
But I've had to give birth to a whole new idea. And it was hard because it was hard for the website, and it's been tough for the podcast because I am not doing what everybody else is doing. Everybody else is telling tips and tricks and and that's not me. And so if you have an idea or you see a pain point and it's not being serviced, the odds are you're going to have to invent the wheel. You're not in a situation where you can just ride some other person's coattails or, mimic their model with a slight riff. I had to kind of start all over again. And I feel like that's part of why I'm still not rocking it on social media, because everybody else is on Instagram and whatever. And they're like, hey, here's the top 10 ways to, help your guests have a great experience or And I'm like, why am I talking about that? Because really I should be talking about the companies or, whatever. And so I'm still finding my voice on my social media. And in my case, it's slightly complicated in the sense that I have to be neutral in a sense. I can't go on and I can't, even to you guys, I can't be like, well, Rubaru is the best, because it isn't necessarily the best. Depending on what your business is, there's other choices. TouchStay is great, but does it scale as well as some of the other companies and the other digital guest guides? well, then that's debatable. Like it literally all depends on what your business is. And like everyone's always like, what's the best PMS? Oh my God.
Someone popped in, how do you spell Rubaru? And I tried to Google it and attempt to spell it out, and I'm not finding it either. So can you shed some light on that?
It's RUEBARUE.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay. And I asked them, I'm like, Rubaru, that is such a random company name. Where in the world did that come from? And I'm thinking they're going to tell me some story of, oh, we just needed a name where the domain hadn't been bought. But actually, the founder of Rubaru is from the country of India. And I think it's like an Indian word or out of a song or something. And if my memory serves me correct, it's something to like, pleased to meet you, or has some friendly connotation. But yeah, I literally would never have known that.
Yeah, you get all the backstories and all this stuff now, having the podcast. That's great.
It's been so fascinating. Like that was a conversation last summer. Literally, if you guys had been with me as I've been talking with and connecting with all these companies over the last year, I should have been recording it because I had a podcast already and I didn't even know it.
Speaking of, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you, to find more information on your podcast, all those good informations and details?
Yeah, let me put it. I'll just give you guys my email address, but Christianne at STR Hub. I'm also Christianne.Crump on Facebook. And then it's just at Christianne Crump on Instagram. And I think it's Christianne-Crump on, whoops, I'm spelling my own name, on LinkedIn. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much for hopping on here, showing us the behind the scenes of the website. Super cool to see even just your thought process as you were designing it and building it, and kind of what you're doing in real estate still. So anyone who's interested in what she's doing, definitely give a follow to that podcast. What's the title of it?
It's going to be the STR, or no, I always want to say STR, Short-Term Rental Solutions Show.
Amazing.
Short-term rental solutions. And so just to give you kind of a time frame on that, I'm just starting to record episodes now with my guests, and Will wants me to get like 5 or 6 shows in the bag, all recorded and done, and then we'll actually launch. So it's going to be probably the end of July-ish that we'll actually go live with the show, but it's coming and I'm super excited. And I'm really excited to have people like Rubaru and companies that people haven't necessarily ever heard of before, because there's so much to learn still about these companies, and they're doing amazing things. So
awesome. Super cool. Well, we will have this recording available on YouTube, and we'll drop all the info and notes that she dropped in the channel available for you guys there. Thanks for coming to hang out. Alex, any parting words? No,
thank you, Christianne. Remember, get the book Hospitable Hosts Volume 2. We're both in it. Really cool story there. Nice short read. I always like listening to and learning the actual host journey, right? Because we all have that journey. So next month we have these meetups once a month. Next month we're going to be talking passive investing for those of you that want to be completely hands off, what that looks like. So
love it. I might have to tune into that too.
Awesome, everyone. Thank you. Have a great night. Take care.
Thank you guys
so much, everyone.
Bye.